Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Coachman. For today's reading, I'm going to be reading a lovely story called Anansi and Nothing. And I know I've read a couple of, or at least talked about Akan, oral traditions, which are stories that have been passed down through generation and generation. And that's most of these stories, or a lot of the recent ones, where they were never written down. It was just told from grandmother, grandfather to son, and then that was passed on to their son or daughter, and their son or daughter, and then pretty much that's how everything went. But the funny thing about the about Anansi is that there's I've been looking around and there's tons of these stories which they use Anansi, which is a spider, and the spider actually does some pretty wild stuff. So with this one, this primarily is basically it's dealing with pride and intelligence, cheekiness. So we'll get into this and hopefully you enjoy. So let's go. Near Anansi's miserable little hut, there was a fine palace where lived a very rich man called Nothing. Nothing and Anansi proposed, one day, to go to the neighboring town to get some wives. That's amazing. It sounds like they're just going to go get groceries. Accordingly, they set off together. Nothing, being a rich man, wore a very fine velvet cloth, while Anansi had a ragged cotton one. While they were on their way, Anansi persuaded Nothing to change clothes for a little while, promising to give back the fine velvet before they reached the town. He delayed doing this, however, first on one pretext, then on another, then up until they arrived at their destination. Anansi, being dressed in such a fine garment, found no difficulty in getting as many wives as he wished. Poor Nothing, with his ragged and miserable cloth, was treated with great contempt. At first, he could not get even one wife. At last, however, a woman took pity on him and gave him her daughter. The poor girl was laughed at very heartily by Anansi's wives for choosing such a beggar as Nothing appeared to be. She wisely took no notice to their scorn. I'll give you a little something about this. Is that I was once Nothing, and I gotta say it was. I gotta give credit to those women that maybe not take pity, but they look at the guy that may not have nothing and say, "Hmm, there's something there though," and ride it out. So we'll see. But as you can see, you know, Anansi, there are many of those out there that just, I don't know. I think you can see them. Those guys, those people that wear, um, like all these rich brands and then take them shits back. I ain't gonna lie, that's weird, but I've heard of it happening, and I actually know of friends that have done that. Like go buy jeans, jacket, or even a dress, and then wear it somewhere looking all like fantastic, and then take that back. Weird, but okay, it is what it is. So the party set off for home. When they reached the crossroads leading to their respective houses, the women were astonished. The road leading to Anansi's house was only half cleared. The one which led to Nothing's palace was, of course, wide and well made. Not only so, not only so, but his servants had strewn it with beautiful skins and carpets in preparation for his return. Servants were there awaiting him with fine clothes for himself and his wife. No one was waiting for Anansi. Nothing's wife was queen over the whole district and had everything her heart could desire. Anansi's wife could not even get proper food. They had to live on unripe bananas with peppers. That sounds absolutely disgusting. Unripe bananas with peppers. Like maybe if somebody is from West Africa or anywhere in Africa and can tell me like if there actually is a meal like that, please let me know because it sounds horrible. The wife of Nothing heard of her friend's miserable state and invited them to get to a great feast in her palace. They came and were so pleased with all that they saw that they agreed to stay there. Accordingly, they refused to come back to Anansi's hut. He was very angry and tried in many ways to kill Nothing, but without success. Finally, however, he persuaded some rat friends to dig a deep tunnel in front of Nothing's door. When the hole was finished, Anansi lined it with knives and broken bottles. He then smeared the steps of the palace with ochre to make them very slippery and withdraw to it a little distance. When he thought Nothing's household was safely in bed and asleep, he called to Nothing to come out to the courtyard and see something. Nothing's wife, however, dissuaded him from going. See, that's a good woman. See, good women, good women. Not only did she take him when he was at his lowest, she stayed with him and got rewarded for it. See, build with a man, you know what I mean, and you can become a queen. Just remember that. Go with a king, end up broke as shit like Nothing is all his wife. So Anansi tried again and again, and each time she bade her husband not to listen. At last, Nothing determined to go and see this thing. As he placed his foot on the first step, of course he slipped, and down he fell into the hole. The noise alarmed the household. Lights were fetched, and Nothing was found in the ditch, so much wounded by the knives that he soon died. His wife was terribly grieved at his untimely death. She boiled many yams, mashed them, and took a great dishful of them round the district. To every child she met, she gave some, so that the child might help her to cry for her husband. This is why, if you find a child crying and ask the cause, you will often be told he is crying for nothing. I like that one. That one's awesome. And yeah, that's all. Honestly, it's funny. Like, ask a kid why they're crying. Well, for me, whenever I asked, yo, why are you crying? I was like, nothing. You know, my parents often said, yeah, well, keep it up and I'll give you something to cry about. But that was only when I was like bad and stuff like that. And I remember like many parents used to use that like threat and whatnot if you were acting out or whatnot. But it happens, you know what I mean? You live and you learn. But the thing about this story is why I think it's so relevant today is that like it is like you get many people that expect to be rewarded for nothing. And honestly, the wildest part about it is just like how, you know, in this situation with Nothing and Anansi going to find a wife, this is what you get. Like there's so many times that I've seen where, you know, men, you know, try to go after the most beautiful woman in the world, and what ends up happening, it's she's not worth it. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing about her, no depth. You know what I mean? Can't cook worth a lick, can't clean a home. You know what I mean? Has no money and broke. And then you get on the flip side, you get women that go with these guys, and like the guy's a complete dickhead and an asshole, has no personality. It's just like money, 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 and that's it. And then what ends up happening, you find out that all that money and all that show, he's broke. Because how can you have any money in your pocket when it's like everywhere else? You know what I mean? So a lot of times, like, yeah, we want something for nothing. And it's like, no, when you're willing to like put in the effort with people and, you know, and you're willing to stick it out, you're willing to like, you know, actually do the work. And guess what? You get like that, like Nothing's wife. She didn't expect anything of him. Okay, she felt a little bad for him, but obviously said, wait, I made the right choice. Okay, you know what? This is a good guy. He's not a bad person. And guess what? She said, no, I'm going to go with you. Even though you have nothing, guess what? It's going to be me and you with nothing. So it's a gravy thing. But also, you know, I think pride, it convinces us that we're smarter than reality. And it is. Like a lot of people are very like, they're proud and prideful. And, you know, I once heard this thing on, I was watching a YouTube video, and I hear a lot of times like women will say, "Well, why should I settle?" It's not about settling. See, that's people like that's people's pride. Like, "Oh, I'm worth this much." And it's like, "Nah, that worth is all just it's bullshit." You know what I mean? It's bullshit. Like your worth isn't based on anybody else. And like that's people being proud like, "No, I belong up here." It's like sometimes no you don't. And who cares if you're up there or you're down here? As long as you're you, you know? Nobody can ever take that away. And that, the last thing I would say is that look, the lesson like for me, it's simple, but it is sharp. And that's not every scheme produces a prize, which a lot of people are going into things. Like they go into things with a they go into this with an idea of like, oh, I'm gonna do this, this, and this is gonna be the outcome. And you know what? I'll tell you this, and I'll end it with this way. My grandmother once told me. She said, "Boy," she said, "life is simple, but fools make it difficult." And that's as easy as it gets. You know what I mean? You make life simple, and guess what? You get the rewards. So, hopefully, you enjoyed this story, and please let me know whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on YouTube. Um, let me know like what do you think about the story. Let me know what your ideas are. Whoa, excuse me. Let me know what your ideas are, and until next time, take care.